Hip-hop has a long problematic relationship with women. But why don't we talk about it? And what can we learn about the recent wave of lawsuits against some of the most well-known male celebrities out here, like Diddy, Jimmy Iovine, and Jamie Foxx? And finally, what changes in the law are making it possible for victims to come forward and actually pursue justice, even though many years have passed since the alleged offense? Well, I'm so glad you asked because I'm talking about it after the break.
Brokers, welcome to another episode of Brokers, where we talk about the unbelievable ish this country has done to keep us broke. Now here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Hey everyone, this is Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And today on Brokers, y'all, we're talking about your favorite trifling hip-hop musicians and celebrities.
Well, Amber, is it really, I think today, is it more than hip hop? Is it just like, can we just call it like black music? I feel like
that is very fair.
We're going to talk about some non-hip hop people.
That's very fair. Very fair. Yes. Your favorite trifling problematic black male musicians. Yes.
Okay. Well, to be very specific, thank you.
Yes. Yes. Let me clear it up.
So,
clear it up.
Amber, before we go down this rabbit hole, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? Have you been keeping yourself busy?
Well, we had the holidays. So, child, I was cooking like your favorite big mama and your favorite auntie. Okay. And that took 3 whole days. And I really just been recovering the last couple of days because I'm tired. But we did put our Christmas tree up. So that was fun. But I'm really still recovering from Thanksgiving because auntie is tired. Okay.
How does it take 3 days to cook, Amber? Like, how does it take 3 days?
So y'all can clearly tell Erika's not about that life. So you do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you have to prep Tuesday. Wednesday is your big cooking day. And then Thursday in the morning before you eat, you doing all the things. You're putting your mac and cheese in the oven. You're warming up the stuff you cooked on Wednesday.
That's not cooking though.
Girl, you making your last minute stuff, your giblet gravy, your stuff that you make the day of. You always keep a few things you make the day of. Like it is a 3-day process. You do all your Thanksgiving in one day, Jesus?
Well, so to be clear, this year, my mother decided she was going to host, and I had school stuff to do. So I was at the library. I couldn't have been cooking anyway. But normally,
you don't know.
But normally, I cook all the sides for Thanksgiving. I don't cook a turkey, but I cook all the sides, and I do that on Wednesday, including the desserts that me and my kids make. And I do all my cooking on Wednesday. But yes, like I don't actually put my dressing in the oven until Thursday. I don't put my mac and cheese in the oven until Thursday, but I'm not cooking then. So yes, I do all of it on Wednesday.
But like on Tuesday, you don't like shred your cheese. You don't snap your beans. You don't pick your greens.
No. And in fact, this year I got one of these things. You can crank it for the cheese grating. Child, let me tell you, you put that cheese in, because Amber, what I was going to tell everybody is I was very excited because my mac and cheese was delicious this year. Every year the mac and cheese is kind of, like sometimes my kids, they remind me when one year I put too much mustard powder in it, and they bring that up every year. And so this year, I was very proud. My mac and cheese was delicious. And my daughter, who thinks she is chef and thinks she got a palate, said she had no notes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that, your long-lost doppelganger twin, Keisha Lance Bottoms, was also getting dragged on the internet about
my
her
mac and cheese don't look nothing like Keisha.
So I just want to say it's highly ironic.
First of all, I don't look like that heifer. Okay, that's the first thing. Keisha is problematic in ways beyond her macaroni and cheese, and that ain't got nothing to do with me. All I'm saying is this year, my macaroni and cheese was delicious.
Listen, I'm impressed. I'm proud. You get all your stuff done in one day. Listen, I'm not. That's not where we at over here. So I had to sit down yesterday. Okay,
I hear you. And all I made was the macaroni and cheese and cranberry sauce, which I know that's a problematic thing because some people are like, I only want the thing in the can. Give me my ocean spray. Okay, whatever.
So you made some chutney, sis?
I made homemade cranberry sauce is what I made, Amber, and it's delicious when I make it.
Did
Okay.
you put
Every year I
orange?
look
You
for it.
put orange peel in it?
I do, heifer. And cinnamon and nutmeg and allspice as well.
Does it have raisins in it, Karen?
Anyway, and the other thing that I'm very excited about is that so my family and I went on this is our first time going to a concert as all four of us together. Because like I've taken the girls to concerts before. Mostly it's been me taking the girls to concerts. Most of the time, I guess he doesn't go. So we went to go see PJ Morton last night. It was great. I love PJ Morton. I love that my kids know PJ Morton and love PJ Morton. But I will tell you that my kids are not church kids because at the end, PJ was playing a song and they were like, it's very repetitive and he's been doing it for a very long time. And I was like, you know, his daddy was a preacher and this is this is gospel, what PJ is doing, is gospel children. And they were just like, and I said, the message, he's trying to give you a message in your spirit so you can hold on to it. So you got to hear it, you know, the repetition. So when the trials come, you got to pull this thing out.
Come on.
And the children were like, is he done? Because I would really like him to play the song that they were not there for it. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
But we had a good time though. So in spite of that, in spite of the 10-minute song that he did play that was not on his discography, we had a very nice time at our little family picnic. Family concert. And then one of my daughters too, you know, she tries to be the stylist. So we all were dressed in black and white. That was our theme. So we went out here.
I thought when you sent the picture, I said, oh, okay, well, they got to coordinate. But I just thought I was seeing it wrong. But then I was like, yes, coordination. You know, I love a good family coordinating moment. So
yes,
you know, but I know that is not normally your jam. So I thought I was just reading too much into it because I knew that was not your idea.
Look, so, I'm out here trying to be different in the world, okay? I'm out here trying to be different. I'm embracing all the things, letting things go that don't benefit me and all that.
Well, you're gonna mess around and start liking a family coordinating picture, girl. Don't dibble and dabble too much. You're gonna start to like it.
But Amber, let me tell you what I don't like. I don't like is what has always been going on. Right. And so the things we're going to talk about today are not unique to they're not unique to the 2000s. Like there has been a problem, of course, with people and music and abuse probably forever. Yes. But I think there are some interesting things to talk about in terms of like the current environment, who's involved and what it all means for us.
Yes. And I also think it's interesting that this episode is immediately following the interview we did with Nikki Gilbert, because who you are anywhere is who you are everywhere. And your propensity to be abusive and exploitive of people in one area always necessarily follows that it's happening in more than that area. And so the propensity to steal and exploit creatives financially and creatively, in light of that, it should not surprise us that there is an insidious undercurrent of sexual exploitation and abuse happening in the same industry, because it's all related to the same evil root.
It is. And so I do want to just start this off by saying this show absolutely has a content warning because lots of the things that we're talking about are awful. And for people who are victims of or people sexual assault or abuse, or people who just don't want to hear that kind of information or talk about those sorts of things and themes, I get it, but we just want you to know that there is going to be a lot of that as we move forward in this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Amber, I think everybody is aware of the fact that recently Cassie, and I don't even know Cassie, I can't even remember Cassie's last name, which is terrible. I should know Cassie's
Ventura.
Last name. Thank you.
Ventura.
Cassie Ventura. And she was a longtime girlfriend and in a relationship with Diddy for many years. I know that everybody knows over the past couple of weeks, she actually, I guess, initiated a civil lawsuit against him. in the state of New York. And the reason why it's interesting that this all happened in the state of New York is because last year, so about a year and a half ago, actually,
Correct.
Governor Hochul of New York signed into law the New York Adult Survivors Act. So Amber, if you don't mind, can you give us some information, some details on the New York Adult Survivors Act before we talk about the specific lawsuit with Cassie and Diddy?
Yeah, so the New York Adult Survivors Act was essentially meant to open up a window that would allow victims of sexual assault or sexual abuse to have an opportunity to go back and pursue civil remedies against their abusers, even if the statute of limitations had already expired. And so a lot of people have heard that term thrown around, but in every cause of action in the United States civil system and criminal system, there is an accompanying statute of limitations. There's very few exceptions. For example, in most jurisdictions, there's no statute of limitations on murder. In many jurisdictions, there's no statute of limitations on rape or sometimes sexual assault that is accompanied by great bodily injury. But for the most part, you have a time window once something happens to pursue criminal charges against a person or to pursue a lawsuit if you are seeking civil remedies. And so what we know about the nature of sexual abuse allegations is that many people take a very long time to come forward. And by the time they come forward, very often their window of pursuing both criminal justice and civil justice is often closed because the statute of limitations has expired. And so what the New York Adult Survivors Act purported to do was it said, hey, we're going to open up a 1-year window from November 24th of 2022 to November 24th of 2023 to give survivors an opportunity whose statute of limitations was normally closed, an opportunity to go back and file their lawsuit. And so that's why last week we saw this flurry of lawsuits, because that window was closing and we were going to revert back to the normal statute of limitations, which in a lot of places is usually somewhere around 4 years to bring those kind of claims.
And specifically for New York and the New York Adult Survivors Act, one of the things that I keep hearing come up, and actually broader than that, just related to this case in general, I keep hearing this idea of civil versus criminal. It's like, she just a gold digger. Why she didn't bring a criminal case? You know, why she in a civil case, you just after money. So can you please, as an attorney, talk to us about first the difference between a criminal case and a civil case, why one might pursue one course of action versus the other?
Yes. So it's so interesting you bring that up, because that's the first thing I talk to jurors about when I am picking a jury on any civil case, because people have a very negative opinion of this perception that all a person wants is money. So the way the American criminal justice system is set up is when somebody does harm to you, there's only two ways they can be held accountable. They can either be held criminally accountable if their actions are a violation of a criminal statute or a violation of a penal law in a particular jurisdiction, or they can be held civilly liable if there is a civil law or a civil statute. But in civil cases in the United States, the only recourse you can get is money. Like if somebody hits your car, you don't get a new car, right? You get money damages. So if somebody assaults you in the United States and you choose to sue them civilly, you don't get an apology, or you don't get them having to make reparations to you on some emotional level. The only thing that the court can do is award money damages. There are very few exceptions to that rule dealing with like real estate and that type of stuff. But for the most part, those are your only two options. But the primary
one quick thing, I don't understand in this capitalist ass society how we don't understand that money is the recourse. Like, y'all need to stop.
Yes.
Like around here, where is money not the recourse? Anyway,
yes.
Sorry, I'm going.
Yes. So yes, and you have to remember that when you are suing somebody, what you are hoping is that the court's power in rendering a judgment will compel them to make you whole. And so when you start trying to give people a bunch of stuff that's real complex and complicated, it's very hard for a court to enforce that anyway. So we have decided in our capitalistic ass society, like Erika said, that the easiest way to do that is by giving people money. And as it relates to that, the difference really between civil and criminal is in a criminal case, the victim does not have any control over that process. So when you file a complaint with a law enforcement agency, all you can do is file your complaint. You don't have any investigative power as the complaining victim. You don't have any power to compel people to provide evidence. You don't have any power to question people or try to get documents. All you can do is turn it over to the police agency, and it is in their hands to investigate. And even after they investigate, they turn their investigation over to the prosecuting agency in that jurisdiction. The district attorney is who it is in most places. And then there's an intake process in this. I used to work in intake when I was a DA. I can tell you how many cases I sent back like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. For a variety of reasons. The investigation might have been sloppy. A lot of times things would come up with officers. By the time we got the cases, the officers would be suspended or on administrative leave because of problematic things they had done. So they wouldn't make credible witnesses. So we would have to reject the case because all of the evidence attached to that problematic officer is now out the window. So even if the investigating agency completes an investigation, there's no guarantee it's going to make it to be prosecuted. The indictment might be rejected by the grand jury, or the district attorney's office may outright reject it. So there are a lot of hurdles that you have to go through. And that is especially amplified in cases where you are talking about allegations of sexual misconduct or sexual assault or rape, because in most of those cases, there's only three types of evidence. There is biological evidence, and there is the evidence of the victim, and there is the evidence of the alleged violator, the offender. And so most of the time, one piece of that evidence is going to be missing because the offenders are usually not cooperative. And depending on the time that the complainant comes forward, you might not have any biological evidence because it is no longer available. And so usually all you have is the word of the complainant. And so it can be very difficult in that context to prosecute those cases. And so a lot of them don't get prosecuted for that reason.
Absolutely. And one quick other thing about New York Adult Survivors Act, and then I think we can put that to the side and talk about Cassie and Diddy specifically, is that I was reading in a few articles that, you know, Amber, you talked about sort of the flurry of all of these suits coming in sort of at the last minute. Well, the interesting thing to me, and of course to many other people, was that the majority of the suits that came in were filed actually against the state of New York, in New York City, local counties, local governments, because of allegations of abuse at state prisons and in local jail systems. So to your point about all of the evidence that gets put out because of problematic officers and bad actors in this, you know, justice system that we have, so many of those complaints were to the same people who are supposed to be the ones protecting people, who are supposed to be advancing those claims so people can get criminal justice in these situations. But they are the ones who are the face of so many, the majority of the complaints that came out of the act. And that is super interesting.
Yes. And I think it also reminds us that this is part of why it's so important to have a civil component to these laws, because in this country, the police police the police, okay? And so when you have an allegation of a prison guard assaulting you or a law enforcement officer assaulting you, and that claim is investigated by another law enforcement agency. That's crazy. That's crazy. And so, yes, that is why it's so important to have money as an available remedy, because for a lot of these cities and for a lot of these municipalities, that is what gets their attention, because they are not involved in the day-to-day oversight of the law enforcement and the police agencies in their jurisdiction. And they usually do not become incentivized to look into this type of rampant abuse until it becomes time for them to pay out these large settlements, and it goes public during election cycles and all the things.
And even then, I'm convinced that now people just have budget line items for, this is for police brutality, for sexual assault, just line items on your budget, because they know they're going to keep doing it. And let's not even make a problem out of it.
100%.
Let's just plan for it.
100%.
So no, Cassie ain't a gold digger. This was the only remedy that was available to her.
Correct. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why Sean Diddy Combs settled the lawsuit was to clearly obstruct the possibility of any criminal investigation. So we'll explain that later as well, because that's quite frankly the reason why this settled so fast.
Well, hold on, Amber, hold on. We getting there. Hold on. So Cassie files this suit, and in the documents, there were, Cassie said, or Cassie's attorneys on her behalf, there were a lot of things, right? In the different articles that I read, there were a lot of allegations. So allegations of sexual assault, sexual battery, of course, awful physical abuse, sex trafficking, forced sex acts with sex workers, male, female, while Diddy allegedly watched and masturbated. Allegedly, he filmed many of these encounters. You know, there is the story about him allegedly blowing up Kid Cudi. You call him Kid Cudi, that's his name?
That's his name.
Kid Cudi's car, right? Then that man going around on a bicycle nowadays, because every, you know, like, that's what happened.
Beating up other people as well.
Yes. Allegedly making Cassie carry a firearm. Now, of course, Diddy has denied all of these claims. He says that they are baseless. And of course, they settled for an undisclosed amount. But let's first talk about, Amber, the allegation. So with somebody who has experience, you know, even tangentially to this arena, tell us what these sorts of allegations mean. What does that look like?
You know, one of the things that's significant about this is that this is the way that her lawyers drafted the petition is very, very brilliant, quite frankly, because they essentially alleged a criminal enterprise. And that is
like RICO?
Yes. I mean, it essentially like a criminal conspiracy between Diddy, between Bad Boy, between Epic, between Geffen, essentially saying that those entities were profiting off of the abuse and exploitation of Cassie because she was signed to Bad Boy, which was a subsidiary of, I believe it's a subsidiary or under the umbrella of Epic and Geffen, and that they were aware of or should have been aware of what was happening to her, and they did nothing about it because they were profiting from it. And
were they all named in the suit, or was it just Diddy? Okay, so no, all of
they are.
So when we talk about settling, whoever, it wasn't just him that settled. All of those parties settled together.
It probably was not him who settled. I mean, I can tell you as somebody who works for a large corporate entity, whenever the corporate entity and related individuals are named, it is almost always the corporate defendants who are writing the check and settling for the individuals that fall under their umbrella. Very rarely is it the individual themselves, because the individual usually has less money. And also, usually when individuals are sued in this capacity, and Diddy is an exception, it can be difficult to hold the individual responsible if you allege that they are acting as an agent or a representative of the corporation, right? Because basically
you don't have that high level.
Correct. So I am assuming Diddy has some type of insurance And so he is different because he probably had an umbrella policy that may have covered part or some of this, but I suspect that it was the corporate entities that paid the bulk of this settlement.
Now, Amber, I've heard you talking about different unrelated cases before. And in those situations, I think I remember you saying like certain people get, like, the corporation might get assigned 50%, or the person might, like, do you think that played in? And like, what could those percentages look like?
So here's the thing about this. So that is the negligence framework. So a lot of the work I do has to do with negligence, with people like falling, dying, having accidents, that type of stuff. And so in that case, that's called apportionment of fault, where you assign levels or percentages of responsibility to each party. And so, for example, if there's $100 of settlement, but you assign 30% of the fault to the plaintiff, the settlement of $100 is reduced by the 30% so that they would only get $70 as opposed to the full $100 because they have to pay for their own 30%. But in this case, this is a joint and several liability type of cause of action, which means that all of the defendants are jointly and severally liable for the damages that Cassie is alleging, which means that each one of the defendants can be found responsible 100%. And that is also part of the reason why the corporations likely settled as well, because the statute is written in a way that imposes joint and several liability.
Oh, wow.
So that means that, for example, that's why if you look at the caption, there's Jane Doe defendants, Jane Doe corporate defendants as well. And so one of the things about that is sort of dangerous or problematic is, there's other people involved, but you can't find them. And so in a case where there's, negligence, like the kind of work I do, a lot of the times when I get cases like that, where you have Jane Doe defendants, you just try to put as much fault on them as possible. Like, hey, they were 90%, or hey, they were 95%, because they're not there to defend themselves. They're an empty chair. But when you have a situation where you have joint and several liability, it is very hard to do that, because one of y'all or all of y'all could each be held 100% responsible for all the damages. So it makes the risk analysis a lot higher for the corporate defendants, because even if they can allege that Sean Combs was the primary actor and he was the person perpetrating all of this, all her lawyers have to do is establish that they benefited from it. And the law says they are just as liable as he is. And that's why this is such a toothsome statute, because everybody is in the hot seat equally.
Wow. And so based on these allegations and just putting on your hat as a defense attorney, what you think Cassie walked away with on this one, Amber? I mean, I'm just saying, if you had to guess.
I think Cassie absolutely walked away with 8 figures at least. People were talking about $30 million and all of that. 100%, I believe it was an 8-figure settlement. And I will tell you that what she got was a payment that represented a desire for them not to conduct discovery. And that's why I think she got so much money, is because they settled this lawsuit because they did not want to conduct any discovery on this matter.
And tell the brokers what happens in discovery, but let us know.
So let's talk about the primary difference between a civil and a criminal case. When a criminal case is filed, all of the evidence becomes the property of the state or the law enforcement agency, right? So whatever documents they might get, text messages, surveillance footage, DNA, all of that evidence becomes the property of the state. Now, most state investigative agencies now have laws, now that we have had all these horrible issues with exonerating people, that criminal defense attorneys are entitled to a copy of that file. But that is not because that is constitutionally or legally required. That is a policy or a procedure in most places. Like, for example, in Dallas County, where we are, there is an open records requirement that allows defense attorneys to come in and get a copy. But that's not the law in the state of Texas. That's just what Dallas does.
I did not know that. I thought discovery was the law of the land.
There is no discovery in criminal cases. No, ma'am. Discovery is a tool in civil cases. So in civil cases, when you sue somebody, there is a process of exchanging evidence that is structured called discovery. And so we have three types of discovery. We have discovery related to interrogatories, which means I'm allowed to ask you questions and you provide written responses. We have discovery related to the request for the production of documents and tangible evidence. And then we have discovery called depositions. And depositions are where witnesses or deponents are required to sit under oath. And they are required to provide answers to questions that are truthful, sworn
Ain't
answers.
no Fifth Amendment.
Well, yes, but now let's talk about it. So generally in a civil case, there is no Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. However, in a case like this, where there is a possibility of subsequent criminal charges, now the statute of limitations on most of the charges has long run. So you cannot plead the fifth on that. But I would suspect his lawyers were going to work overtime to find some shit where the statute had not yet run. Because that I would have hired somebody, a baby lawyer, that their job would have been nothing but to read the penal code to find something he could plead the fifth for. So that is part of what gave this such a high value case, is that for most of the charges, the statute has run. So Sean Combs would not have been able to plead the fifth. And because of that, he would have had no basis to refuse to testify under oath. Now, let me tell you why that is so dangerous. Because whatever you say under oath in a civil proceeding can be used against you in other cases. At least once a week, I have attorneys subpoenaing me. They are subpoenaing the deposition testimony of this person or that person, completely unrelated to the case that that person testified in, because they want to use that testimony in another case to prove a different thing. And so part of the reason why this was going to be so explosive is there were going to be corporate representatives that were going to be required to be deposed under oath from these record labels, Mr. Combs, his staff, all of these people. And all of these other lawsuits would have been able to get that testimony. And I'm going to tell you something else that's real nasty about our system. A lot of these lawsuits are driven by the same few plaintiffs' firms. So they all work together. They all share information to drive the value of settlements up, because the higher the settlements are, the better it is for all of them. So the plaintiffs' bar in this country is very stealth. They work together. They share information. And I firmly believe that part of the reason why this case settled is because they did not want to engage in the discovery process and create that type of footwork for the lawsuits coming after Cassie, and potentially open themselves up to some criminal charges where perhaps there might have been an ongoing conspiracy or ongoing things that charges could have come out of that. It is just a landmine they were walking into. And so whatever Cassie got, baby, she got it. And she got it fast. Because when you settle fast like that, that means you settling for a lot of money. Because normally, I can tell you, when I get a lawsuit in the door, usually plaintiff's attorneys are not even willing to talk to you about settlement at that point. They want discovery. They want to at least go a little bit so they feel like they have some ammunition to get more money. So the fact that these people settled that fast lets me know that somebody picked up the phone and said, we finna send you the check over. Fill the number in and we'll sign it. Period. That's what happens. Okay. Usually at this point in the game, you still begging for, hey, can you send me a demand? What do you want? Like sometimes sometimes I'll pick up the phone to a plaintiff and be like, tell me what you want. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, Amber. I need a little bit of time, Amber. I'm not there yet. I'm not there. Yeah.
So instead they were calling and they weren't trying to say, give me a number. They said, you here is the check, you fill it in, and let's go.
And let me tell you another reason why we know that happened, because one of the things that the statute does is it provides that the victim has 21 days, must have at least 21 days to decide if there's going to be a clause in the statement, in the settlement of non-disclosure, or a clause restricting their ability to speak about it afterwards, that you have to at least wait 21 days. And so another reason why I suspect that the figure was so high is because they were paying to waive that period, right? They were paying to, they had to pay her a premium to not engage that process because it settled in under 21 days. And so I would suspect that all of that was built into her getting a very nice non-figure settlement.
Well, Amber, at the end of the day, unfortunately, I can't be like, he did it, but I'm like, y'all come to your own conclusions. But I'm like, based on the things that I read and the speed and the pace and I got my conclusion.
Here's the thing, even setting Cassie aside, because what we know is that settling civil cases is not an admission of liability. That will be in the paper, whatever.
Thank you, Amber.
Whatever. But I will just say, we should have been side-eyeing this man for all the shit he has admitted. Okay? The math is right in front of us. Misa Hilton was not 18 when she got pregnant with Justin Combs. Okay? I remember a couple of weeks ago, I was texting with Erika in our group chat, and I was like, I've been side-eyeing Diddy since what he admitted out of his mouth he did to Usher. Okay? Like the stuff that he is admitted doing out of his own mouth. This man has been problematic in our faces for years. Usher went to live in New York with Diddy as a producer when he was an adolescent, 10, 11. There is an interview on the World Wide Web right now, Rihanna Fenty's internet, where he is admitting turning Usher out, having him engage in sexual conduct with women who are adults as a way to get him,
having him get raped by women.
Yes. And lying to his mom, like cracking jokes about Usher's mom calling to check on him, and they're telling her that he's with a tutor. Like these things are on the internet, things that he has admitted out of his mouth. Like,
well, so Amber, I do want to stop you for 1 second here and talk about that part, because at the beginning, I think we might have said, like the misogyny and all of that. And don't get me wrong. I think probably, I don't have the details, but probably if I were going to do some scientific research, I would find out that in this case, right, as it relates to music and abuse, that the men are more problematic in terms of the abuse that they mete out. But your point, I also don't want to just gloss over, in that there are also plenty of women who are connected to and in this music industry who are also very happy to abuse, rape, and take advantage of young boys and men who are not quite men enough in ways that they absolutely should not. And we should be just as horrified about that as well. Yes. And I do want to talk about the fact that there are probably lots of other, if we were to look at young male groups, if we looked at the older women who came and took advantage, who raped them, who did all of those things across time, that would also be...
It's on the record. Boosie has admitted doing it to his sons. It has been openly acknowledged that it was done to Bow Wow. So you're absolutely right. Like this notion that this is somehow a rite of passage for young men in the music industry to be raped and violated by grown women is very normalized. And it has been happening and discussed in our faces for years. And we have turned a blind eye to it, 100%.
And that's the part about this for me that is so hard, is that these people don't work by themselves. Yes. These sorts of things happening is not because there is one deviant person or personality. These people get propped up we prop them up because, again, we hear the stories, but we keep them on our playlists, right? We see the news headlines and we ignore it, and we wonder, what she did, what he did, what the real story was, when we know what's going on. So I do want to, in 1 second, talk about the complicity of all the other people who are around and holding everybody up. But before we get to that, really fast, Amber, Diddy was also implicated in 2 other suits, at least coming out of the Survivors Act in New York. And one of them goes back to 1991, from a former student at Syracuse University. And there was a third woman who claimed that she was sexually assaulted and raped by Diddy and also by Aaron Hall. And the reason why this one to me was really frightening is because then I saw on social media all of these videos of Aaron Hall circulating. And when I tell you, I have not seen or heard anything like that in a while. It was awful. And I don't, outside of growing up and listening to the music on the radio, right? I don't know Aaron Hall, right? Like I'm not familiar with his background or what people on the street know or think about him. So I don't know that part. But I actually had to write the transcript because, of course, we can't show the video, but I had to write the transcript of what this man said. And I just don't even think I can read it. So I'm not. But essentially, Aaron Hall got on an interview. It looked like it was from Vlad TV. I don't know the timing of the interview, so I don't know how long ago this was. But this man boasted about being well endowed. He boasted about the fact that he didn't have to build relationships with women or speak to them. He would literally just grab their hands and he would, in his words, have sex with them. I don't know if it was coerced. It sounds like it would have been coerced to me, for days on end. And he said not only that, but that he likes to do that in public and he likes to do it where other people can see them. And he mentioned so many names we know about, right? He talked about that everybody's seen me. Denzel Washington has seen me, Jodeci, Diddy, they've all seen me do this thing to these women. And I just, like I said, I can't even, when I watched the video, it was like, it's too much. But the fact that many interesting parts, one of them, Diddy's name keeps coming up, right?
Yes.
As it relates to Aaron Hall and other things. So that's interesting to me. But so many other people that we just are like, yeah, like Jamie Foxx, who also has recently been implicated with some charges. And I just feel like a lot of it is rotten, Amber. A lot of it.
100%. And again, people like Aaron Hall, we've seen this because we had the math. His child's mother, Gloria Velez, who is a former music video model, she released her high school ID shortly after that video went viral just recently. And she said, look at me. I was 16. I looked like a baby. She said, this is who I was when I met him. And so even if we did not know all of the tawdry details about what he was doing and who he saw and who saw it, the math is mathing because Gloria Velez had a whole baby with that man. And so as a teenager, I was about to say, and as a matter of law, when that child was conceived, she could not consent as a matter of law. So regardless of what you want to call it, regardless of what they try to make it look like, you cannot be in a consensual relationship at 16. The age of consent in Florida at the time was 17. It is what it is today. That's what the age of consent is in Texas. That's where the age of consent is in New York. It is 17. So as a matter of law, she could not consent to have sex with him. Point blank, period. And anybody who tries to say that that was a relationship of any kind is full of garbage.
And Gloria has since come out and said that Aaron Hall and others would allegedly go to these teen clubs. And
Yes.
Amber, you're a little bit younger than I am, but when I came up, there were teen clubs. Like that was a thing, right? Like they had these places where my mom would never let me go, but they had places where, you go, you drink punch, you dance, right? Like that's a whole thing. As a teenager, it's supposed to be a safe space for you to go and hang out with other kids in high school. Well, according to what Gloria's saying, that Aaron would go, right? And go with Uncle Luke.
Yes.
According to Gloria, to these teen clubs to go scouting for girls that they can groom.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like, and I will just say Uncle Luke has denied these allegations, but I think we've all seen this happening, and we've heard this multiple times about multiple celebrities. R. Kelly was alleged to hang out at a McDonald's across the street from a high school in Chicago. We've heard these stories before. And again, I feel like there was some serious shit over our eyes in the 90s. Because when we were researching for this episode, I still remember the episode of Oprah where Brandy and Wanye were on there. And like Oprah's asking questions about Brandy dating Wanye when he was like grown and she's like, yeah, well, my mom knows about it and my parents are giving us permission. Like she was dating a whole grown ass man, and they were talking about it on the Oprah show like it was normal. Like we was drinking some serious Kool-Aid in the 90s about the acceptability of this kind of stuff.
I have been, over the past few days, I have just been horrified. And didn't R. Kelly come from Aaron Hall? Ain't he from that rotten tree? Like, wasn't he?
Well, he was working with Teddy Riley. Aaron Hall was with Teddy Riley, but they all kind of ran in the same circles. I don't know that R. Kelly was affiliated with Teddy Riley and Aaron Hall, but I know around that time they were all rising to popularity at the same time, because this would have been around the time when Aaron Hall was in Guy with Teddy Riley and his brother.
Okay. Well, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And we talked a little bit before about Jamie Foxx. So there was Jamie Foxx mentioned by Aaron Hall in this video that I saw, and recently accused of sexual assault. And in Jamie's case, there was a woman who said that he was groping her. And apparently she alleges that her friend saw the encounter too. So Jamie denies those allegations. But I haven't heard anything about a settlement. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
But I think a lot of these cases, quite frankly, will settle, because I think there is going to be a lot of concern again about the discovery. Because what I can tell you is that nobody, and I'm saying this as a former prosecutor, nobody who engages in this type of behavior gets caught the first time or gets called out the first time. And so if there is one victim, there is always almost certainly another. And I believe that because of that, a lot of these cases will settle fairly quickly, because a lot of these celebrities live in California and New York. And so the New York statute was modeled after the California statute. And so the sunset of the New York statute is coming, and there's no indication about whether it will be renewed or not. I think almost certainly the law in California will be renewed. And I think there's a lot of fear, because that is a hub for a lot of these people. And that's why I think so many of these cases are going to settle, because there are women and victims who have yet to have the courage to speak, because nobody touches the fire just one time in this area. There's always a pattern.
And there is always a pattern. And I think, to your point of sort of people playing in our faces, one example of that I think we saw is, of course, with Russell Simmons and Cora Lee Simmons, right? So, Amber, you want to talk about how young she was when they got together, and he at the time was at least twice her age.
He was 21 years older than her. That's exactly right.
So more than twice her age.
She was 6. She said she was 15, I think, the first time she met him formally. but then 16 when he started to pursue her, And so again, these are things happening right in front of people's face. Like if you go back and look at the interviews from when they had first gotten married, I believe she was maybe 23 or 22, but she was on interviews saying they had been knowing each other 7 and 8 years, and she was like 23. So these things have been known. Like everybody could add and subtract in the 90s. It was being said right in front of our faces. And she talked about, as an act of solidarity with Cassie, how she was very sympathetic to the allegations that she made. She knew that world very well. And she said, I myself experienced that, getting into a relationship with somebody who was older than me, who had a lot more power than me when I was just 16 years old. And so, yeah, I feel like it's been going on. And I think that's one of the reasons why I thought it was so odd when his children came out a few months ago to talk about his abusive behavior, how everybody was like, oh, that's a lie. Russell Simmons does yoga. And I'm like,
y'all lost the plot.
Yeah, it's like, but y'all know he's at least one specific type of abuser because their mother was his victim.
Allegedly.
So,
but Amber, he's doing yoga in Bali though. Why?
Correct.
Ask him why he's doing yoga in Bali.
Okay, because there ain't no extradition agreement between the United States and Bali. Okay.
Right.
Okay? Yes, which means that even if they could establish a criminal case against him, they have no way to get him back to the United States because Bali does not do mutual extradition between its country and the United States. So he knows that there's very likely no chance that he would ever have to face any type of criminal accountability for anything he's allegedly done. And I guarantee you that was not a mistake that he moved to Bali. Okay? That was not a mistake. That was not an accident at all.
No, I mean, I don't think it was. But another interesting thing to me is people, you talked about like Kimora speaking out, and I get it, right? Like you can't see the forest for the trees, right? When you're in the thing, I don't think you have an appreciation for the fact that you're in the thing. But there were other people speaking out, like 50 Cent, who ain't no love for 50 over here. I think that man is super problematic. But he has a lot to say, almost, Amber, like he knows what's been going on, like he's seen what's been going on. And back to the point of who around these people knew, he's one of those people that seems like he might have known what's going on. And so let us take a little bit of a dive into who is in these camps, who is with these folks, who are the people who are enabling this behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you saw where Diddy's former bodyguard posted on Instagram in support of Cassie, and he was like, yeah, I was there. I saw it. She's not lying. And while that's admirable now, it's like, but sir, what was you doing then? What you was doing when this lady was getting beat? What you was doing when this lady was getting tormented in the ways that you confirmed seeing her getting tormented? And if you saw it, I'm certain there were other people who saw it too, And it's like, what were they doing? What were they doing?
And it's just like in the case of R. Kelly, when we watch Surviving R. Kelly and all of the different documentaries, there were always the cousins, the security guards, the other family members who were like, yeah, we know we drove Aaliyah here or there, allegedly, or did this. And I'm like, we are in community with people who are abusers. And not only are we in community with them, but we are enabling their bad behavior. We are the ones who are turning our eyes away from what we see. We are the ones who are providing cover for them. We are the ones who are giving alibis. And in terms of just this show, Brokish, that to me is the most horrifying thing, is that as members of the community, what is our responsibility and what have we been doing? And I know people are afraid, right? Like it's easy for me to be like, you should have done this and you should have done that. When somebody's out here beating people up, blowing up cars, potentially putting hits out on people, right? Like it's easy to be like mad, but then at the same time, you're looking at all the list of things that are happening. So I get it, but we have a responsibility, and I just feel like we're not holding up our end of the bargain.
Yes, because even in situations where there's not power, I've never talked about this publicly before, but when I was sexually assaulted, I was in a room full of people. We were in a hotel room, teenagers, and it was some college boys. And I remember the guy that was assaulting me, I didn't want to be like the blocker that ruined it. So at first I was like, stop, no, no, no. And then I started getting like real scared because he was like pinning my arms down. He was not stopping. And so I got loud and I was like, stop, stop, stop. And there was another man in the room, and I don't know who it was because it was dark, like mocking me, like, stop, stop, stop. And finally, somebody turned the lights on in the hotel room. And that's the only reason he stopped, because somebody turned the lights on. And so what I will just say is that is not just a situation of community responsibility with people in power. Like, for whatever reason, we are very normalized to this horrific belief that what happens between men and women is between men and women, even when we have very clear indicators that what is happening is not consensual, when what is happening is violent, and when what is happening is something that should not be happening. We have hook, line, and sinker been made to believe that what happens between a man and a woman is between a man and a woman. And that is just bull crap, especially when it's happening right in front of your face.
Amber, I didn't know that. And first of all, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I am.
Yeah. And for the record, for people who think that, that happened to me my junior year of high school. When the lights came on, immediately I just started acting like I was okay. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. The first time I spoke about it, like really acknowledging what happened, was when I got married for the first time in 2011. So that was 9 years later, because it happened my junior year of high school. So like in 2001 or 2002. So I never told my parents. I never told anybody. And to this day, I can still see his fraternity windbreaker. I can still smell his cologne. I can still see the waves in his hair. I can still see that room in the Red Roof Inn off 35 in DeSoto. I can still see all of that. But I never said a word for 10 years just because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, we have a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We very much have a responsibility. And I think even in the small ways where we can make a difference, like, how hard is it to take somebody off your playlist? Like, I know that music is important in our lives, but there's a lot of it. And so any of that, and how important is any of these contributions that they've made? Are they so important that we're willing to turn our backs on people who need our help just because? And it just seems so trivial, and it seems so silly that, like, how hard was it for people to be like, mute R. Kelly? Like, that shit took years.
Right. And also, y'all, and if you don't listen to anything else we say, I want you to hear this next minute or so. We do a piss poor job of teaching consent in our society. Consent is not, did she say no? Consent is, did she say yes? That is consent. Consent is an affirmative yes. When you put the burden on somebody to say no, you are not only making an assumption of entitlement, you are promoting all of the problematic things that are at the roots of misogyny and capitalism, like this right to exploit and be invasive into other people's bodies, and that you only have to stop if they object. That is not consent. Consent is, did you ask and did you get a yes? And until we start teaching that, and until we start drilling that into people's head, that if you do not have affirmative permission to engage with somebody sexually, then that is a problem. We are going to be in this place over and over again. Because waiting for somebody to say no puts the burden on them when the burden is on you to make sure that that person is comfortable with the ways that you want to engage.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know if y'all can tell, me and Amber didn't plan all this out. So I think we're kind of, or I'm at least just like, whoa. And like I said about the content warning, shit is real out here.
Yes.
Shit is real out here. This is not just, to Amber's point, this is not just a problem that happens in the music industry. That's, of course, the high profile piece of it that we can see that has so much visibility. But y'all, we have a responsibility where we are. And it doesn't have to, we can do the things like taking people off our playlist and not engaging in their creative pursuits and, you know, removing them out of our lives that way. And that's one thing we can do, which is kind of like, I guess, a parallel to like a civil remedy, right? Like that's the money part of it.
Yes.
But if we want to talk about the root work that has to happen, that is work that we do in our communities through teaching our children, and not even just our children, just people, about what is consent, what is problematic, what is abuse. It's not always just sexual abuse that we're talking about. And I think there are just all of these conversations that we probably need to be having more of, so that we don't continue to just ignore all of the things that are clearly all around us.
Yes. Amen.
So yeah, I ain't got nothing else to say. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.